Bottle. So, hello everybody, my name is Lisa Keys. I'm the director here at the MAC. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for coming tonight to Val's Art Talk and discussion of the current exhibition, Universe, moderated by Jeff Whittington. Curry's exhibition will be on view through May the 3rd, and he will also be with the MAC at Earth Day, Texas. And that's April 26th and 27th, where with collaborator Robert David Reedy, he will demonstrate the process behind the sculptures in the one-day exhibition, which you might have caught at Road Art in the fall. And all of those works are created from discarded paper cups and trash from area Starbucks coffee shops. So it's a pretty cool interactive element to add to MAC's Earth Day booth. Very environmentally conscious, and it'll start a lot of great conversations, I think. So in case you weren't aware, the MAC's Art Talk program is supported in part by the City of Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs, and also in part by our membership base. So if you're not currently a member with us, and you enjoy programs like these, please consider joining today after the talk. You can come and speak with me, or Claire, or Alyssa, like any representative of the MAC. So now I am very pleased to welcome and introduce to you our moderator for this evening, Jeff Whittington. Jeff is executive producer for Special Projects and KERA Think Series and host of Everything You Ever Wanted to Know on KERA 90.1. He also created and launched the KXD Live Session Series for KXD 91.7. Thank you so much for being here to lead this discussion, and I'll turn it over to Jeff now, who will introduce Val, and we'll get started.
Thanks very much. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm going to briefly introduce Val. First, I should say, in full disclosure, I came down with a cold like Friday, so I'm going to be eating cough drops and probably coughing stuff, but I can pull them on. Also, full disclosure, Val's my brother-in-law, so it's a very small world. When he asked me if I'd be interested in doing this, it's not just because he's my brother-in-law that I'm here tonight. So
I've known Jeff for 11 years. This is the first time in my career that I've even felt confident enough to ask you about something like this. So.
Oh well, you should, right? Everybody's seen the work that's here, and we're going to talk a lot about it and about Val's work in general. I've been a fan of Val's work, I think, for 11 years, and we have a really early piece that you actually gave us as a gift many years ago, and still, I look at it every day, and I'm really excited that we have it. But Val is married to my wife's sister, and I can't remember the actual circumstances of our first meeting, but Val's a very interesting fellow. He's very idiosyncratic. And he's currently working, and I'm really excited that he's with UTD, working on an MFA right now in the Arts and Technology program. And if you haven't actually investigated the ATech program at UTD, it's this cross-disciplinary, really forward-thinking setup where, and we can talk about how that plays into your work too, where artists, engineers, philosophers, historians, and just sort of general liberal arts folks get together and solve big, huge problems, or work on solving big, huge problems. So Val is working on that there. He was a resident at the Central Track Artist Residency Program 2 years ago, and he received his BFA in sculpture from Texas A&M in Commerce in 2011. His work's been seen locally, nationally since 2004. Including performance art pieces with Plush Gallery in Williamsburg, up in New York and Dallas, as well as group shows in Chicago, Houston, and the Dallas area. Most recently, he exhibited one day collaborative exhibition with Robert David Reedy at Row 2 in collaboration with MAP 2013, which was a series of works, shows, performances that was curated by Janelle Ingolstadt here in Dallas. The works from one day continue to be featured in the exhibition Objective Strategies over at El Centro, and are included in the MAP 2013 catalog, and Val's represented by Row 2 Art here in Dallas. So, Val Curry, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So to start off, talk a little bit about the work that's here at the MAC, and I trust everybody's seen it. Tell us a little bit about the process and maybe some of the philosophy behind the pieces that we see here in the show.
Okay, the body of work right now on display is probably one of the most cohesive bodies of work that I've done to date. It pulls on a thread that I started in 2008 with the spiral as a physical shape component and kind of a philosophical and mathematical element to it. So my biggest inspiration is from nature, looking at nature, and that kind of also is paired with sort of our man-made world of garbage and excess and production. So it's kind of always been working that line, tying those two together. So you'll notice there's one artwork in there by another artist, Robert Moore, and with a spiral in it, and something about seeing that really resonated with me as just a structure, and I kept coming back to that and thinking, man, what if I could translate that into a sculpture? I've always been sculpturally based, and for a while the form of my work, the forms were kind of all over the place, and I found that as a very cohesive element to tie things together so I could work with these different textures.
So the spiral came from that artwork, that other artwork, or did you see it? Where did you see the spiral aspect initially?
I did see the spiral in that painting series. That's one from a painting series that he did. But I've always known, in nature, there's everything from like little DNA strands to spiral galaxies, seashell formation, sunflowers. And so that's kind of resonated with me of, that doorway into how nature creates things. And so I like that as a backbone of me creating things, trying to see what the systems are of nature and tying that into how to make sense of our kind of built world and the waste that we produce in our world.
So the pieces that are here, and we'll talk a little bit about the One Day project too, and specifically some of the thinking behind that in a little bit. But the pieces that are here, how do you go about constructing them?
Okay.
I mean, because they're pretty, physically, there are some laws that are kind of being broken there, I think. So
in the larger ones, there's a PVC pipe plumbing, so it's basically your plumbing tubing structure. And I think how I found out about that, looking under the sink, you see that little curve. And then I was at Home Depot and saw they had different angles of the curve and realized those could be put together to form, any infinite variety of shapes. And so that's the base. I'll start out with that, glue those together. Well, actually, I'll start out with a model. I'll make a small model of what I want the form to look like. And then I'll build from that the larger piece, and there'll be kind of a wrapped coating around it to give it strength and integrity. And from there, I'll just start getting all the donated toys. So to bounce back really quick, I originally started working with toys that I would get from like a dollar store just because it was a cheap thing. I liked the form, and I saw it as a unit, like constructing units. And so that kind of spurred it. Some friends of mine saw I was working with toys, and they were like, oh, we have several bags of our children's toys who are kind of grown up a little bit, and something about the value of it, they didn't want to throw it away, but you couldn't sell it, and so they lent it to me, or gave it to me to transform into art. So that became sort of the system that I'm connected with.
Now, so you don't have to actually go out and source these things.
No.
It's still coming.
Yeah.
It's coming to you.
Yeah. They were like, oh, this is like, they're kind of interested, engaged, and wanting to do that.
And are they still all people you know, or is it starting to?
People I know, some close, some peripherally.
So I'm curious about the what you end up with. You have the armature, you have the layers of material, and we're talking specifically about the larger pieces,
Right.
obviously. Do you know what that's going to look like before you begin, or do you have to wait and find out?
A little bit of both. So when I start working, the form is the biggest. The form is the biggest thing. When I start putting the toys on, it's a very laborious process. I'll just put them on, and this body of work, I've actually worked with an assistant for the last year, and so I'd kind of teach him my process, like, okay, do this, and he'd do it, and we'd work back and forth. I'll kind of grind a radius on the toys, and as it gets filled up, I'll come back in, cut some away. So it's an additive and subtractive process, going back and forth, revealing the form, obfuscating it. So I do not always know what the final piece is going to look like.
You have an idea?
Yes, yeah. And I think then the more that I do them, I have a sharper vision of what I want it to look like.
So take us back to the day, the time, the place. Set the stage for us when a young Val knew that he was an artist.
Okay.
And tell us about that moment. That realization.
I think I was 3 years old, and I was actually looking through some papers that my dad had saved. I still have those. And it's like some of my teachers kind of wrote analysis. So the one that stuck out in my mind was Val's been working on these marker drawings for like 3 days. He'll come into school. He's just sitting there just doing his stuff, laying down, drawing, and he just brought this stuff up. I'm going to be an artist when I grow up. And so it's funny, like looking back, I found those when I was maybe 8 years ago. So I don't know. There's kind of that thread there.
So did you make work the whole time as a little kid, all the way up through high school? And
There was a time when I did not do stuff. I've been through various phases, always very strong creative energy in whatever form. I think when I was like in junior high, I was into knife making, kind of like blacksmithing. Moved to Texas from Illinois, and sort of a dead period, but just kind of doodling, doing stuff. Picked it back up. I've always made art. I know that was kind of rare when I came to college. I realized that a lot of people who were in college had never made art before. There wasn't like a thing they did. They just came to school and they're like, oh, take an art degree. And I thought that was a little unusual, being like a creator.
Yeah, I mean, it was just something that was natural for you.
Right.
Well, tell us a little bit about where you grew up in Illinois.
Okay.
You grew up in what is an intentional community. Maybe
Yes.
you can explain a little bit. Tell us about that community and explain a little bit about what that means.
So I grew up in considered a village, small town called Stell, Illinois. It's in northern Illinois. And it was founded in 1962 by Richard Kinniger. It was a philosophical, sustainable community. So he had written a book called The Ultimate Frontier that outlined his philosophy that was given to him by his teachers, and people were very inspired by it and came together, and they
It was kind of a doomsday, almost
Yes,
a doomsday sort
Yeah.
of manifesto.
Right.
Sort of, yeah.
There was, I guess, some prophecies, the apocalypse, kind of thing. So that did not occur as we have seen.
The
But-
dates have been removed apparently,
Right.
according to Wikipedia, in the subsequent
So
printings of them.
it's been kind of a, mixed experience for me, like embracing that, rejecting it, like finding what some of the truths for me are, what my personal path is from that, and I feel like I've fairly extracted what I needed to.
Your father was a member of this.
Yes, correct. That's how
community.
he moved there. They had a very good school system when my older brother was born, and they kind of opened up the school to, it was a little bit more closed, and they opened it up, so he was able to get my brother into school there. My brother's like 7 years older than me, and so then I was born there, and I lived there till I was about 10, and
And that's the school where you were making early artwork
yes, correct. Yeah.
in this community.
Yes.
So you moved to Texas to another intentional community.
Well, we actually moved down here to, my dad got a job down here, a different, his company transferred him. So we lived in Garland, and actually the founder of that community has started another community down here, out near Quinlan, and so with that connection with that. And he used to do it was a few years on, I think, 101 with Charlie Rose. There was a radio show that did interviews, Richard Kinniger. So I think there's still some transcripts of that.
So, some really interesting things have come out of that Stell community. It's now, from what I gathered, it's become sort of an HOA for all intents and purposes now. But there's like a Center for Sustainable Studies there that teaches classes and workshops, and it isn't too far removed from some of the ideas